Even for someone known to tell untruths, lies, last week was a particularly prolific week for President Trump. According to an analysis from the Toronto Star, Trump made 103 false claims last week. An average of 15 per day. My gut is the Mueller stuff is bothering him a lot, or he got a call he didn't like. That's usually what happens. That shattered his previous one-week record of 60 from back in March. Per the paper, as President Trump makes an average of 101 false claims per month, Joe. And this really does have serious implications in terms of our democracy. And
it sends an amazing, it sends a terrible message globally, and anybody that suggests it doesn't is either ignorant or they're liars, and they're just dupes for Trump, because Admiral Stavridis, you and I grew up, Mike Barnicle grew up at a time where we were in the middle of the Cold War, and it was Russia that was constantly churning out lies. Their leaders saying things that everybody across the world knew wasn't true. The joke in America would be if somebody said something that was blatantly dishonest, would say, you know, my God, what are you working for Pravda now? And remember at the beginning of the first Gulf War, everybody joked about Baghdad Bob saying things that he knew was false and that people watching knew was false, but he would say them anyway. What is the impact globally when we have a president who does that? Who says things that are false? He knows they're false. The reporters know they're false. And yes, even most of his followers know that they're false, but they repeat them anyway because they want to blindly follow a man that so many of them are in this personality cult with.
You know, this is often called gaslighting. It's just repeating something over and over again until your followers just kind of accept it. And I'll answer the question, how is it affecting us, by saying I've been on the road for about 2 weeks in Europe, Asia, Hong Kong, Singapore, France, Italy. I spend half my time in every meeting kind of explaining what's going on with our president and our administration. It's just enormous sand in the gears, and this is really what the NATO heads of state and government are concerned about. It's all a distraction, and it has significant potential consequence if we don't have credibility in crisis, and that is what really ought to concern us.
Well, Admiral.
And you know, Mika, we were talking, Mika, about what Donald Trump, all of Donald Trump's lies about what was happening on the border, and we went through them one by one a couple of days ago. Talk about our allies, talk about the impact. Donald Trump's not only lying about what's happening on our borders and what's happening in our country every day, and again, this is an opinion, it's verifiable. Put one tweet next to another, put one statement next to another, put one image next to another, put one chart next to another. It's objectively verifiable facts. He's not only lying about what's happening in America. Last week, he lied about what was going on in Germany, saying because of Angela Merkel's immigration policies, crime in Germany's at an all-time high and her approval ratings are at an all-time low. That actually, objectifiably, both of those statements were false. Angela Merkel is the most popular politician in Germany, and German crime is at a generational low. So what impact does that have on perhaps our most important European ally when our commander-in-chief, our president, is lying about their internal affairs and lying about the person that runs their country?
Long-term impact. Our strategic alliances, those behind closed doors and above board, are being whittled away. The United States is being brought down. Everything that we stand for and our place in the world, he's chipping away at it every day. And at some point, hopefully, Americans will understand what is happening. I don't think there's a deep understanding across the board about how vital it is that we are respected. Not about strong, it's about respect. Admiral Stavridis, thank you very much.
Thanks.
Appreciate it. Still ahead on Morning Joe, more on the reaction to the Supreme Court's decision to hold up President Trump's travel ban. Senate Foreign Relations member Chris Coons is planning to introduce anti-discrimination legislation in the wake of that ruling. The senator will join our discussion. Plus, New York Congressman Joe Crowley pays tribute to the woman who ended his 10-term run with a song and a lot of class. And not just any song. We'll talk to the 28-year-old Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, who unseated him. Morning Joe will be right back.
Thanks for checking out MSNBC on YouTube, and make sure you subscribe to stay up to date on the day's biggest stories. And you can click on any of the videos around us to watch more from Morning Joe and MSNBC. Thanks so much for watching.